Hi everyone and welcome to another video from Hostile Territory. In this video we'll be talking about if you're getting ready to quit your toxic workplace and get out of that horrible position you're in. Should you leave on your own initiative or should you wait until you get fired? Now this is one question that lots of people in a toxic workplace ask themselves. Hopefully you'll get some useful information to help yourself if you are in a similar situation. So stay tuned.
Hostile Territory.
Before we start, I would just like to recommend my other video about how to make an exit strategy from a toxic workplace, or the video may help even if you're leaving a normal workplace. I'll leave a link in the corner of this video and in the video description, so perhaps that may also help in making a decision and leaving the company the proper way. I must also mention one more tip that I mentioned in the previous video. Never make a decision like this in the hype of the moment. So if you've just went through a bad situation at work, a bad situation with your boss, with the company management, if someone yelled at you, if you've made some sort of mistake or something like that, and you're all pumped up to get out of that place as soon as possible, for the love of God, don't do it that way, okay? Whatever happened, at least give it a couple of days, go home, think it through, have a cup of coffee or tea, think it through, think what happened, and after that make this kind of decision. In a toxic workplace this can be very hard to do since it's a very bad environment to be in, but for the reasons we're going to talk about now, it is very useful to think it through first. Now, dear viewers, to come to the point of this video, how to make that decision. So should you resign or should you stay in the company, and push the whole thing until you get laid off? Well, there is not much philosophy on this topic, at least in my humble opinion and from my experience, to be honest with you. There is one and only one main factor you should look at when making this decision, and that is your own benefits, okay? What you get from it and how much you can get from it in the long run, in the short term, whatever. There are various kinds of benefits. You can have health benefits from leaving the company, you can have financial benefits, you can have psychological benefits, the list goes on. Essentially, there are only a few bad things that can happen when leaving a toxic workplace. The first thing you should consider is health. If you're starting to have health problems from that toxic workplace, if your health is declining, if you had good health and it started going downwards, if you're visiting the doctor all the time, then in that case you should resign as soon as possible and don't have any dilemma about it. I know there might not be money in the bank. I know there might be a family to feed. You might have other plans, but if it starts hurting your health, resign and don't wait, okay? Just get out of there as soon as possible. Another factor that you should consider is of course, the financial factor. Why am I telling you this? For instance, in my country and what I've seen on YouTube and what I've read on the internet, lots of other countries have programs for helping unemployed people. So when you are unemployed, you go to the government institution and they give you some sort of financial aid through that period. In my country, they give I think it's 6 months of financial aid. It's not that much, but it's significant. In other countries, it may be a longer period and with more money, but all in all, you get some money for that period. But the condition, at least in my country, is that you have to get fired from your work. Okay, so if you resign, if you leave the company on your own initiative, there is no money. So if you have a situation like this in your country, you should seriously think about this part and make a plan. If you're financially capable of supporting yourself, then you can more or less on this part do whatever you want. If you feel like leaving, resign and leave. If you don't have money in the bank and you'll have financial problems during a period until you find another job, seriously consider this. I would also recommend to previously go to the government institution in your town, municipality or something else, ask about this, inform yourself, and then make a decision according to that. That financial aid might be the factor that helps you make that decision and saves you until you find your next job. Another thing you should consider is what is the present state of the company while you're leaving and making that decision. Here, there are also various factors. Is the company successful? What's your position in the company? What kind of paycheck you're getting from them? What kind of benefits? There are Various reasons for this. I would put it like this. If you're in a company that's smaller, where you get a meager paycheck, and all of this is obvious and logical, but nevertheless I want to say it. If you work in a company that's crummy, that's bad, that you get a bad paycheck and everything else, just don't think about it. Leave the company, and that's it. Resign. You don't have to wait until you get fired. That is just postponing the inevitable. You're going to do it sooner or later, and you don't have any benefits from it. So if it's a low paycheck, if it's a bad job, if the people are super complicated, super toxic, and everything else, resign. You have no use in being there. But if you, like I did, work in a renowned company that is on a global and state level, very recognized, very good company, very good employer. In my case, I left the company because of a problem in the lower levels of management and inside a branch office and everything else. But the overall impression was, since I resigned, that I resigned from a good and well-renowned company, which is questionable from various aspects. For instance, when I put in my resume for my next job, I think one of the first things that people will ask me is, yeah, well, did you resign or did they fire you? This is a common question, at least in my country, when people interview you. And I'll say I resigned. And then this whole story starts. Why did you resign? Then I tell them, and these stories can go into two ways. Either you'll find a good new employer which will understand what you're talking about, or you'll find someone who will see you as a nuisance and as a danger, and you will not get the job. I hope you understand me. You have to be very careful about this aspect on the image you will leave, not only in your previous company, but also if they ask you in future jobs what you did, what you're gonna tell them, and what you're gonna say. Then you have the legal aspect of the whole subject. And when making a decision, should you resign or get fired, then this is something you have to consider, okay? Don't overlook it in any case, especially if you work in a better, more renowned company. For instance, in my country, there is a contract between the employer and employee, which is made when you get the job. And when push comes to shove, you have to honor that contract. All of the things that say in the contract, you have to do them. And the employer can sue you if you don't do that. So when making this decision, read your employee contract if you have one once more and read it carefully, especially if it's a more complicated one. Mine was pretty simple and straightforward, so there wasn't any dilemma about it. But if you have a more complicated one, perhaps even ask for legal help to see what you may be up against. My point here is that you may not be able to resign. You put up your resignation, you want to leave the company, and they say, oh no, you can't do that because in the contract you have to work 6 more months. Or you have a project that you have to finish, or something like that, And this would, of course, change your whole situation and perception of the whole decision making. On the other side, the employer might have the possibility to fire you at a moment's notice, which was the case in my contract. So if the employer decides to do that, he can just say tomorrow, pick up your things and leave, and there would be no consequences for the employer. So if you have a contract with your employer, find it, read it, but do this before taking any kind of action. Trust me, when you take this factor also into account, it will be much easier to make a decision. So dear viewers, these would be some of the most crucial factors to consider when making this kind of decision. There are other things you should consider, but in my humble opinion, these would be the most important to avoid future headaches and problems. So, a couple of usual scenarios that happen and that I would like to mention here is, for instance, you want to make this decision and you're working in a toxic workplace and you're fed up with it and you want to make this kind of decision. The best option is, of course, that you have another job in line waiting for you, and you're just going to go from one workplace to another. Oblige the contract with your employer if you have to, and leave. That's it, That's a pretty clear option. The next common scenario is that people work in a good company with a good paycheck and good benefits, but are capable enough to learn how to cope with toxic and hostile people. And they have the luck that the people are not that toxic and hostile. In that case, people continue collecting good money, good benefits, learn to brush off that behavior from other people. And in that case, most people wait until they get fired. If you work in a toxic and hostile workplace and people don't like you, like I had the situation, getting fired is imminent, but it can pass a couple of years before that happens. In the meantime, you can collect a lot of money, do a lot of stuff with it, and so on. And one more benefit of that is that when you get fired in that manner from the company, you can apply for the mentioned government aid and get even some more money on top of that. The worst scenario would perhaps be when you work in a crummy company with bad behavior towards you, a low paycheck, low or no benefits. You have constant problems with your coworkers and with the people around you, with the management. In that case, you should resign as soon as possible and get out of there as soon as possible. There is no dilemma about that. So in that case, don't wait until you get fired. There is no benefit from it. Leave as soon as possible. So dear viewers, since this video is becoming pretty lengthy, I'll leave my story about how I left my previous toxic workplace for another video. It will be probably the next in line. And there I'll tell you my personal own experience, what happened to me in that case, and how I made this kind of decision. Once more, for the end, when you think about either quitting your job or waiting to get fired, always think about your benefits first. And if you make a decision through that lens and with that view, I am confident that you will make a good decision. And of course, don't hurry with making the decision. Just, take your time, think it through, and think what's best for you. That's it for this time. Thank you very much for watching. Please like and subscribe. It's a huge help for the channel. And once more, all of these videos have one main purpose, and that is to help you get through tough times in a toxic and hostile workplace and to get out of that place as intact and as unscathed as possible. Thank you for watching. Thank you for your time, and hopefully I'll see you in the next video.